Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new Godzilla release. Although this has actually, I guess not technically brand new, it's been out for, a month or two, but I just recently had mine finally shipped from Big Bad Toy Store, and I now have it here to take a look at with you guys. This is obviously Godzilla Minus One. This is the Super 7 version, and I believe this is the first time that I've ever actually reviewed a Super 7 Godzilla figure here on my channel, so that's pretty cool as well. But I will say the figure looks really, really nice. They definitely did a great job on the sculpt, and this is also the first Godzilla Minus One figure that I've seen in person, which is also really fun. And on top of that, it's very sizable, which is definitely a good thing. But as you get nice and close here to the head of Godzilla, you can see the head sculpt looks really nice. There's definitely some very impressive fine detail throughout, nice looking skin texture. The coloration of Godzilla is basically a black, and then they've like dry brushed some brownish tones over the majority of the body, but it's not exactly like everywhere. You can see there are some areas that don't have that brown dry brushing, but a large amount of the areas do, which of course you can see the head sculpt specifically definitely has a lot of that going on. And of course you have some nice articulated joints, and one thing that's fun is to have Godzilla look straight at us. Unfortunately, we can see the eyes don't line up perfectly, but it's not too bad, I guess. The eyes are painted with like a off-white, and then there's like an orange and then a black pupil in there, and they look pretty decent, maybe slightly sloppy, but not too bad. Again, you can really see that brown dry brushing helping to highlight all of the skin texture here on the face of Godzilla. As you lead into the mouth, you can see the gums are painted with a pinkish tone, and the teeth are all painted out in there with a white. The sculpt looks pretty decent in there, and the paintwork for the teeth is also fairly decent for what it is. Again, not sloppy or anything that I can really see. Unfortunately, one thing that does bum me out about the figure is it doesn't have an articulated jaw. It has an alternate head, which I feel like is kind of weird. I feel like if you're going to have a figure with so many articulated joints, why would you not just go ahead and give it an articulated jaw? Why give it the alternate head? And if we actually grab the alternate head and bring that in here for just a moment, you can get another look here again at the head sculpt of our Godzilla. The eyes do line up a little better, I think, on this one. But obviously we can see the inside of the mouth now a bit better because the mouth is open. We can see the tongue is painted with a darker tone, and sculpt-wise, again, it looks pretty decent. Paint-wise, maybe a little sloppy, but for the most part, for what it is, it doesn't look half bad at all. And there is a bit of a glossy look for the inside of the mouth. Outside of that, again, you can see all of the detail looks quite nice, and the paintwork as well looks quite nice for the alternate head of our Godzilla. Again, that's just if you want to have it with its mouth in an open position. But as you lead up along the back of the head of Godzilla, we obviously have that very kind of bumpy, almost armored look to the back of the neck of Godzilla, as we have all of those kind of scoots and everything moving along. You do have an area of articulation actually right here, which can swivel, which you can see can definitely swivel very nicely. Really quite nice range of movement there with that area of the head. It does as well go up and down, so you definitely have some nice articulation there. And then you've got another spot down here in the neck, so you can, of course, again, swivel that neck really nicely, probably all the way around if you would like to. I don't know if that goes up and down. Yes, it does. So there you go. You can see, again, some up and down motion, so you can get a nice look here for Godzilla looking down at the ground, or have him looking up higher. So definitely really nice. But as you move down again into the neck, we can see the skin texture continues to look just as it did there in the face, really quite vibrant, really crisp. As we continue to lead through the body, we again have those spines of Godzilla. Again, the spines that are absolutely Godzilla Minus One through and through. He's got those very unique looking spines, and they are sculpted really beautifully as well. And as you can see, if we get nice and close, the texturing looks nice. You have that brown dry brushing helping to really highlight the detail of that area as well, looking really good for the figure. As we continue to lead down into the arms, you of course have arm articulation, which is incredibly smooth, like super smooth in the shoulder joint right there. I don't know if it comes out away from the body. No, that spot doesn't, but you have another spot right here that can swivel again, which gives you even more mobility. And then you've of course got the elbow joint. Let me go ahead and set that down for just a second so we can stretch the elbow joint out. again forward and back, and can also swivel. And then you also have wrist articulation right here, which is pretty awesome. And then you also have the ability to move the wrist forward and back as well. It is a little stiff. It's not moving super smoothly, but if I bring it close, you can see the joint is there. So it definitely has the ability to do that. Maybe I should warm that up with a hair dryer or something. You know, it's always important when you take a figure out of the box and you start to articulate it not to force the joints if they seem stiff. You don't want to do that. You'll end up breaking it. So either dipping this in some hot water for a little bit, or using a hair dryer to warm the joints up and then moving it. Those are definitely your best options to loosen up the articulation and, of course, not damage the figure. But as you move down through the arm, you can again see that dry brushing there with the brownish tones leading down into the hands. The hands, if my camera would focus on it, look pretty nice. You get the fingers sculpted. Doesn't really look like we have any specific coloration for the nail paint. Basically just you see like the dry brushing over it, so the one nail looks black, the other one has like brown and stuff, so it doesn't look like they really tried to give it any alternate coloration for the nails. But the arm articulation is really quite smooth. As you lead down, you do also have a spot of articulation right here in the midsection, which as we can see is really quite smooth, and you can definitely get some really nice, very impressive range of motion for that area, and that also goes up and down, so you have even more range of motion for that spot. And that might be some of the smoothest articulation for the midsection of any figure that I've seen like this. As we continue to lead down, we have those very big, bumpy, rocky sort of scales and skin texture for our Godzilla. We continue to have the spines moving along the back, but they do, of course, decrease in size as we lead down. And then you can also see we do have leg articulation, which in the hip region again here is really quite smooth. Definitely has some nice mobility there, and they do also move out away from the body, which you can see. As we continue to lead down, you have knee articulation, forward and back. I don't think you're going to be able to swivel. Oh yeah, you can actually. I didn't think you could, so you can get the legs in a position where it's kind of turning the leg. That's definitely nice. I did not expect that. Then you also have ankle articulation right here, forward and back, and then of course can swivel those areas as well. So really nice posability in the legs. As you lead down through the legs, you can see again that really rough and rugged skin texture of Godzilla leading down. You've got a little bit more of that brownish tone showing up. Some areas are way more intense, like up here in the arms, and then some areas are really subtle, like you could see it through the leg here, but it's not nearly as intense as you see up there in the arm or up in the spines of Godzilla. As you lead down, you can see some scoots moving down through the toes. Again, the nails don't have any specific paint to them. Basically, you just see again a little bit of that dry brushing that they've applied with that brown over the course of the nails and everything. As we lead back out here into the tail, you can see the tail looks quite nice. Again, even less of that brownish tone showing up out here, but you can see a little bit of it specifically back here in the spines of Godzilla moving along the back of the tail. You can see that dry brushing a little bit there. You do, of course, also have articulated joints leading out, so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 joints, I think, moving out through the course of the tail. Now that does give you the ability to pose the tail, but I will say the tail on this one is definitely a little stiff, specifically in the first few joints right now. It's really quite stiff, and I'm not getting much in the way of mobility. I don't know if the figure's always like that, or again, if it's just because it's currently a little stiff, but I really don't want to force it. I think I could probably get it a little bit smoother if I, again, heated it up and tried to move it a little bit better. But you can obviously see you have some decent mobility out here in the tail. That's like that classic Godzilla tail pose right there. So you can at least achieve that. But again, the tail here might just be a little stiff as far as the articulated joints. You can see them moving, but they're just not giving me a whole lot of range of motion until we lead to about here. Then it starts to become a lot more smooth and definitely works a little nicer. As you lead along the underside, again, the skin texture looks quite nice. Not a whole lot in the way of variation of color, of course, for Godzilla. Basically just the black tone, and then that kind of like goldish brown that you see in certain areas of the figure. You can see the chest definitely has a good bit of that goldish brown leading up. But of course, it is a fully posable figure, so the opposing side is going to look pretty much the same as far as the figure goes from one side to the other. And overall is absolutely a fantastic looking version of a Godzilla. I am very impressed with how smooth some of the articulated joints are on this figure. Like, it's really nicely done. The only thing I can say is I feel like the brown dry brushing is a little inconsistent to the point where it kind of stands out when it comes to how inconsistent it is. I feel like it would have looked nicer if they would have just done the dry brushing pretty much the same way through the entire body, where some areas on the figure, as far as the coloration goes, almost looks a little naked. Like, as you lead down, like, this area looks super naked because there's really no color added to it. I mean, there's like a slight bit of that brown, but like, compared from here to here, like, it's a huge difference. So I feel like it would have just looked a little bit nicer if the dry brushing was a bit more consistent through the body. As far as a size goes, for a height on Godzilla, as I hit the camera, you are looking at about 8 inches or around 20 centimeters to the top of the head, or about 8 1/4 inches or 21 centimeters to the top of the highest spine. As far as a length goes, we're going to go ahead and turn Godzilla this way, try to extend the tail out a little bit, and then we'll go from the tail to the head about 15 1/4 inches or right around 38.5, closing in at 39 centimeters, but not quite there. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A Human Being next to our Godzilla Minus One from Super 7, and you can see it definitely has a very good, very impressive size to it. Next to these other figures here, you can see Godzilla easily dwarfs everything. We've also got ourselves a Playmates Godzilla here next to our Super 7 Godzilla Minus One, and very clearly the Super 7 figure is massive in comparison to the Playmates release. And then we've also got ourselves a NECA King of the Monsters Godzilla. Now, obviously, a lot of the Godzillas we are comparing here are legendary versions of Godzilla, because those are some of the more recently released versions. And since I only have this as far as the Super 7 figures go to compare with it, I don't really have much else outside of legendary figures, again, to compare. So hopefully that made sense. I kind of worded that weird, but mostly what we're going to be comparing here would be the legendary version of Godzilla, and obviously the Super 7 figure is quite a bit larger than our NECA Godzilla. And as quickly as I say that, I bring in a Godzilla that is not a legendary version, but we have ourselves an SH Monster Arts Godzilla next to the Super 7 release, and again, Super 7 wins in the size department. And then for one final comparison, and what I would say is definitely one of the most impressive comparisons, we have the Hiya Toys version of the King of the Monsters Godzilla, and as you can see, the Super 7 Godzilla Minus One release is larger than even the Hiya Toys version, and the Hiya Toys Godzilla, for the most part, most of the time for me, is usually the winner in the size department when it comes to articulated Godzillas like this, but obviously Super 7 has outdone them when it comes to the size of this release. So this Super 7 Godzilla Minus One figure is pretty darn nice overall. You know, there are a few minor complaints about the figure that I have, and one of which is the inconsistency of the paint application and the brown and the way it's applied. I just feel like it could have looked a lot better if it was a little more consistent over the course of the entire body. The only other complaint I can think of right off the top of my head would be the lack of an articulated jaw. I feel like there really was no reason to include an alternate head when they could have just articulated the jaw. Like, if the figure was like a non-articulated model-like version of Godzilla, okay, I guess you could give it the alternate head so that you don't have a weird articulated jawline or anything like that. But when it comes to a fully posable release like this, it's already filled with all sorts of different articulated joints, so why not just articulate the jaw? Just makes no sense to me, but again, it is nice that they did at least include the ability to have an open mouth and closed mouth version. But on top of that, the Godzilla does have a bit of a satin shine to it compared to what you might expect. Like, it definitely has a wet look to it, and I have heard some people complain about the fact that it has such a strong satin shine, but I kind of thought about it, and it makes sense really that it would have that look, because through Godzilla Minus One, I don't know if you've seen the movie or not, but the majority of the time you see Godzilla Godzilla's usually in the water or has just come out of the water and is kind of just, rampaging a little bit before going back to the water. So the majority of the time, Godzilla is going to look wet. So I don't mind the satin shine to the figure because, again, it is already wet for the most part. Throughout the course of the movie, you usually see Godzilla at least in water or near water or still kind of looking a little bit wet as he has just left the water. So the satin shine doesn't really bother me like it does for some other people. But outside of that, the sculpt is absolutely fantastic. It is extremely highly detailed, very impressive when it comes to the fine detail, and extremely vibrant. Like, the detail jumps off of the sculpt so nicely. It is definitely one of the nicest as far as the fine detail goes that I've seen of, most Godzilla figures. Super 7 really did outdo themselves when it comes to the fine detail on the figure. The articulation is super smooth in certain areas. I would say almost SH Monster art smooth, but then other areas like the tail, definitely a little bit tight, a little bit stiff as far as the articulation goes. Like, that does not have the range of movement that you find on SH Monster arts, but it's still pretty smooth as you lead out toward the end of the tail, and that again may just be because I haven't heated it up. I haven't warmed the joints up enough to really get the tail moving, but that's pretty much the only minor nitpick about the articulation. Outside of that, the articulation is really quite smooth, especially in the midsection. So overall, this is definitely a very cool release, and just on the size aspect alone is worth grabbing because it's so impressive because it's so large. If you are interested, I will include a link in the description to where you can grab one from Amazon and Big Bad Toy Store. I don't know for sure if they're still available on Amazon, but if they are, I will add the link there. And again, if not, you can grab it from Big Bad Toy Store. But one way or another, if you want it, definitely grab it, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.